My name's Daniel Hayes, and if you're hearing this, it means I've finally worked up the courage to tell the story I've been running from for years. I grew up in Milwaukee, a city with a heartbeat that pulses strongest in the fall, when the air turns sharp, the coffee shops smell of pumpkin spice, and the rust-colored leaves scatter across cracked sidewalks. I never thought love would find me here, in this city of beer factories, lake winds, and quiet streets, but it did. And it ruined me. I was 24 when I met Emily. It was a Wednesday afternoon, the kind of mid-September day where the sun doesn't know whether to shine or hide. I was working a dead-end job at a printing shop, ink-stained hands, polyester uniform, and a paycheck that barely covered rent. After my shift, I stopped by a small corner cafe on Brady Street, mostly because I needed Wi-Fi more than I needed coffee. That's when I saw her. She was sitting near the window, sketchbook open, her pen moving like it was dancing across the page. Dark hair tucked behind one ear, oversized sweater, chipped nail polish. She wasn't trying to be noticed, and that's exactly why I noticed her. I don't know what got into me, but I asked if I could sit at her table. She looked up, surprised, then smiled in this quiet way that made my chest ache. "Sure," she said, and that single word carried more warmth than the cup of burnt coffee in my hand. Her name was Emily Carter. She was 22, studying art at UWM, though she admitted she skipped more classes than she attended. She laughed easily, but there was something behind her eyes, something heavy, like she'd lived through more than she should have at her age. We talked for 3 hours that night. About music, books, how she hated the cold but loved the way snow muffled the world. I told her about my dreams of becoming a writer, though I hadn't written anything in months. She didn't laugh. She just looked at me like I was already who I wanted to be. When the cafe closed, we stepped outside, and the chill of the night wrapped around us. I offered her my jacket. She refused, then shivered, then finally accepted. That was the beginning. Emily and I started seeing each other almost every day after that first night. It wasn't planned, not really. I'd stop by the cafe after work, and more often than not, she'd already be there, sketching or staring out the window as if waiting for me. Sometimes she'd draw me without asking, half-finished outlines of my jawline, my messy hair, my ink-stained hands. "You have a writer's face," she said once, which I never figured out if it was a compliment or an excuse for why her pencil never seemed to get my likeness right. We weren't in a rush. There were no big declarations, no dramatic gestures. Just two young people circling each other, orbiting closer every day. One evening, maybe 2 weeks in, I walked her home. She lived in a narrow brick apartment building near the river, the kind with old wooden staircases that creaked under every step. Inside, her place smelled faintly of turpentine and lavender. Canvases leaned against the walls, half-finished portraits, abstract swirls of blue and gray, things that looked like storms on canvas. She poured us wine in mismatched mugs, and we sat on her floor, backs against the wall. She told me about her father, who'd left when she was 12, and her mother, who worked double shifts as a nurse. She said she wanted to paint something that mattered, but she was scared it would never happen. I wanted to tell her that she already mattered, that her existence was already art to me, but the words felt too heavy in my throat. Instead, I leaned in and kissed her. Her lips were soft, hesitant at first, then urgent. The mug tipped, wine spilled onto the rug, but neither of us cared. The city hummed outside her window, but in that moment, all I could hear was the rhythm of her breath. From then on, we were inseparable. Days blurred into nights. I'd leave work and head straight to her apartment. She'd make pasta, I'd bring cheap bottles of wine, and we'd sit on the fire escape, eating with paper plates balanced on our knees, watching the city lights flicker. Sometimes she'd read aloud from the books on her shelves, poetry mostly, though she confessed she never understood half of it. I told her that didn't matter, that it was the sound of her voice that made the words alive. And in return, she pushed me to write again. "You're always talking about being a writer," she teased one night. "But where are the stories?" So I started writing. Late nights, while she painted, I sat at her kitchen table with my laptop, the clicking of keys mixing with the scrape of her brush. She'd glance over at me sometimes, smile faintly, then go back to her canvas. It felt like we were building something together, even if we didn't say it out loud. But love, I've learned, is never that simple. It started small. Missed calls. Texts left on read. Nights where she said she was too tired to hang out, though her Instagram showed her out with classmates. I tried to ignore it. I told myself she needed space, that she was younger, figuring herself out. But the gnawing in my chest didn't stop. One night, I found her crying on her fire escape. She didn't hear me come in at first, just sat there with her knees pulled up, cigarette between her fingers. When I asked what was wrong, she shook her head. "Nothing. Just tired." But her voice cracked, and I knew it wasn't nothing. I sat beside her, pulling the cigarette from her hand, crushing it against the railing. "Talk to me," I said. She hesitated, then whispered, "Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning." I didn't know what to say, so I held her, my chest against her trembling shoulders, my arms around her small frame, trying to shield her from something I couldn't even see. She never explained more that night. And I didn't push. Maybe that was my first mistake. Looking back, those months were the happiest of my life, even with the cracks starting to show. We had our rituals: pancakes on Sundays, movie marathons on rainy nights, long walks by Lake Michigan where the wind nearly knocked us over. She called me Danny, even though no one else ever did. I called her M. There was a warmth in our chaos, a safety in the uncertainty. But I should have known better, because sometimes the people who burn the brightest are the ones who burn out the fastest. The first snow of that year came earlier than anyone expected. October hadn't even ended when the flakes started drifting past Emily's apartment window, thick and heavy, painting the city white. We stood at the glass like two kids, breath fogging up the cold surface. She grabbed her phone and snapped a picture, then turned the camera on me. "Smile, Danny," she said. I hated being photographed, but her laugh was impossible to resist. I forced a grin, and she clicked the shutter. She showed me the screen, my hair messy, my smile crooked, her reflection faintly behind me. "It's perfect," she whispered. That photo stayed as her lock screen for months. Winter wrapped itself around Milwaukee like a fist. I spent more time at her place than at mine, mostly because her apartment had heat that worked. We built our own little world there, mornings tangled in blankets, afternoons at the art studio she loved, nights filled with words and colors. She painted furiously that season. Canvases bloomed across her walls, portraits of strangers, moody skies, abstract shapes that looked like storms breaking apart. Sometimes she painted me. I'd wake up to find her sitting on a stool at the edge of the bed, brush in hand, studying the way my chest rose and fell. "You make me sound like a science project," I teased once. She shook her head. "No, you make me remember why I want to create." Her intensity both drew me in and scared me. It was like she carried something inside her that refused to settle, like her soul couldn't fit inside her body, and sometimes it cracked her open. The first real fight came in December. I had a short story published online. Nothing big, just a small magazine that barely paid. I was thrilled, though, and I ran to her apartment to tell her. She congratulated me, hugged me, even poured champagne she'd been saving. But later that night, I caught her staring at her unfinished canvases, her expression dark. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Nothing," she said too quickly. When I pressed, she snapped. "It's just, you get one story published, and suddenly everything's falling into place for you. I've been killing myself with these paintings, and I can't even get into a student gallery." Her words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they were true to how she felt. I tried to tell her that she was talented, that her work mattered, that recognition wasn't the measure of worth. She only shook her head. "You don't get it, Danny. You'll never get it." She went out that night, leaving me in her apartment with the canvases staring me down like silent witnesses. She didn't come back until 3 in the morning. Her hair smelled like smoke and beer. She crawled into bed beside me without a word. I didn't ask where she'd been. Maybe that was my second mistake. Despite the cracks, we kept going. That was the thing about Emily. She was both chaos and comfort, storm and shelter. One day she'd be radiant, laughing so hard she spilled coffee on herself, begging me to dance with her in the kitchen. The next, she'd retreat into herself, quiet and unreachable, her eyes fixed on some place far away. And me? I loved her through it all. I didn't realize how much of myself I was giving away until I had nothing left to hold on to but her. Christmas came, and she insisted we get a tree, even though neither of us had money to spare. We found the cheapest one on the lot, dragging it 3 blocks through the snow to her apartment. We decorated it with paper snowflakes we cut ourselves, old Polaroids, and tiny sketches she made. It leaned a little to the left, but she said it was perfectly imperfect. That night, we lay on the floor beneath it, the lights casting colors on the ceiling. She turned to me, her face half shadow, half glow. "Do you ever think about the future?" she asked softly. "All the time." "What do you see?" I hesitated, then answered honestly. "You? Us. Maybe a house, kids running around. You painting, me writing." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm not sure I'm built for forever, Danny," she whispered. My heart clenched. I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but instead I kissed her. I thought love alone would be enough to keep her, but love, I'd learned, doesn't always win. January was colder than I'd ever known. Bitter winds off the lake cut through layers of clothing, and the streets turned into rivers of dirty ice. One night, Emily didn't come home. Midnight passed, then 2, then 4. I sat at her kitchen table, phone in my hand, staring at the door. She stumbled in at dawn, makeup smudged, eyes glassy. "Where were you?" My voice cracked. "Out," she muttered. "With who?" She glared at me, defiant. "Does it matter?" "Yes. It matters to me." She threw her bag down. "God, Danny, you're suffocating me. I can't breathe with you always hovering." The words hit harder than a punch. Suffocating. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but instead I said nothing. I just stood there, watching her disappear into the bedroom, listening to the door slam shut. I sat at that table until the sun came up, wondering when love had started to feel like this, and still, I stayed, because when morning came, she crawled into my lap, whispered apologies against my neck, begged me not to give up on her, and I didn't. Maybe that was my third mistake. By February, I knew I was losing her. It wasn't just the late nights, or the way she pulled her phone closer when a notification buzzed. It was the distance in her eyes, the way her laughter no longer reached me, the silence that grew heavier each time we sat in the same room. I tried to bridge the gap. I wrote her letters, small notes I'd slip into her coat pocket, reminders that she mattered to me. I cooked dinners, even though I could barely boil pasta. I even skipped work a few times just to be with her, but no matter how much I gave, it was like pouring water into a cracked glass. It never filled. One evening, I came home from the shop to find her painting furiously. Streaks of red and black slashed across the canvas, violent, jagged. Her hand shook as she moved the brush, her hair sticking to her damp forehead. I said carefully, "maybe take a break?" She spun on me, eyes wild. "Don't tell me what to do." "I'm not," I said gently. "I'm just worried." Her face crumpled, and suddenly she was crying, the brush clattering to the floor. I rushed to her, wrapping my arms around her small, trembling frame. "I'm broken, Danny," she whispered into my chest. "And I'm dragging you down with me." "You're not broken," I murmured, even though part of me feared she was right. She pulled back, her tear-streaked face desperate. "Promise me something. Anything. If I ever get too heavy for you, too much, promise you'll let me go." The words froze me. My instinct was to refuse, to swear I'd never let her go no matter what. But her eyes were pleading, begging for honesty. So I lied. "I promise." March came, and with it, the thaw. The city softened under melting snow, puddles forming on cracked sidewalks, the first hints of spring in the air. And for a while, things felt lighter. Emily smiled more. She started a new series of paintings, bright yellows and soft blues, pieces that looked like hope stretched across canvas. She even submitted some to a local gallery, her excitement bubbling over when they agreed to display her work. The night of the showing, she wore a simple black dress, her hair pulled back, lips painted red. She looked radiant, like she'd stepped out of one of her own portraits. "You're beautiful," I told her. She rolled her eyes. "You're biased. Doesn't make it less true." At the gallery, people circled her paintings, murmuring words like bold and raw. Emily stood beside me, her hand in mine, and for the first time in months, I saw pride in her eyes. Afterward, we celebrated with cheap champagne back at her apartment. She laughed until tears ran down her cheeks, her joy so contagious I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd turned a corner. That night, tangled together in her bed, she whispered, "I think I love you, Danny." My heart nearly burst. "I love you too." It was the first time either of us had said it, and I clung to it like a lifeline. But love, I was learning, isn't always enough. The darkness returned in April. It started with her skipping classes again, then missing shifts at the cafe where she worked part-time, then disappearing for nights without explanation. When I asked, she brushed me off. "Stop worrying so much. I'm fine." But she wasn't fine. Her paintings grew darker again, stormy grays, violent reds, shadowed figures that looked trapped behind bars. Her laughter faded. She slept all day, wandered all night. One evening, I found pills scattered across her bathroom sink. My chest tightened as I scooped them into the bottle. "Emily," I said, voice shaking, "what are these?" She shrugged. "For the noise." "What noise?" She tapped her head. "The noise in here." I wanted to beg her to get help, to see someone, to let me in. But she looked at me with such exhaustion, such fragility, that the words died in my throat. Instead, I held her that night, as if my arms could silence the storms inside her. But storms don't quiet just because you ask them to. By May, the distance between us was unbearable. We still had our moments, soft kisses, lazy mornings, shared laughter, but they were fleeting, fragile things. And then came the night everything broke. It was a Friday. I'd planned to surprise her with dinner, real dinner, not just pasta. I even borrowed my coworker's car to pick up takeout from her favorite Thai place across town. When I got to her apartment, the door was unlocked. I stepped inside and froze. She wasn't alone. A guy sat on the couch, his arm draped casually across the backrest, a beer in his hand. Emily sat beside him, her head tilted toward his shoulder, laughing at something he said. The sound of her laughter cut through me like glass. When she saw me, her smile faltered. "Danny." I didn't hear the rest. My chest felt like it was caving in, my hands numb. I muttered something, maybe her name, maybe nothing at all, and turned around. I heard her calling after me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. The food spilled onto the sidewalk as I stumbled away, tears blurring the streetlights. That night, I walked the city until dawn, my body numb, my heart shattered. She came to my apartment the next day, eyes swollen, voice raw. "It wasn't what it looked like," she swore. Then tell me what it was, I said, my voice hoarse. She hesitated, then whispered, I don't know. And that, somehow, was worse. I wanted to slam the door. I wanted to scream, to demand answers. But instead, I let her in. We sat on my bed, silence stretching between us like a noose. Finally, she said, I'm scared of how much I need you. And when I'm scared, I run. That's what I do. I ruin things before they ruin me. Her confession broke me more than her betrayal, because I realized then I could forgive the mistake. But I couldn't fight her fear. Still, I pulled her into my arms, whispering, We'll figure it out. Please, Em. Don't give up on us. She nodded against my chest. But I think we both knew something had cracked that could never fully heal. Summer arrived, but it didn't feel like summer. Not for us. The city was alive. Block parties, concerts by the lake, the smell of barbecue drifting through the humid air. But in Emily's apartment, the air was heavy, suffocating. We tried to patch things together. Dates at the farmer's market. Long walks where we pretended nothing had changed. Nights where we clung to each other as if our bodies could make up for what our hearts had lost. But beneath it all, there was a quiet fracture. Every laugh felt borrowed. Every kiss tasted like a goodbye we hadn't said yet. One sweltering night in July, I woke up to find her gone. Her side of the bed was cold. I stumbled into the living room, but the apartment was empty. Her shoes were missing, her bag gone. I called her phone. No answer. Texted. Nothing. I sat by the window until dawn, my chest twisting tighter with each passing hour. When she finally came back, the sun was already up. She looked wrecked, makeup smeared, hair tangled, eyes red. Where were you? I demanded, my voice sharper than I meant. Out, she said flatly. With who? Why does it matter? Because I love you. The words burst out of me, raw and desperate. Because I'm scared I'm losing you. Her face softened for a moment, almost breaking. But then her walls went back up. You can't save me, Danny. I'm not trying to save you. I'm trying to love you. Same thing, she whispered. And just like that, the conversation was over. She went into the bedroom, shut the door, and left me standing in the half-light, feeling like I was already a ghost in her life. Still, I couldn't walk away. Every time I thought about leaving, I remembered the way she looked that night at the gallery, or the way she whispered I love you for the first time. I told myself those moments mattered more than the pain, but the truth was, I was addicted to her. Addicted to the chaos, the highs and lows, the way she could make me feel infinite and worthless in the same breath. And addiction, I was learning, doesn't care about survival. It only cares about the next hit. By August, Emily's moods were unpredictable. Some days she was light, radiant, pulling me into parks to lie in the grass and watch clouds. Other days she locked herself in the apartment, curtains drawn, refusing to speak to anyone. I tried to be steady, tried to be her anchor. But the harder I held on, the more she slipped away. One night, after another silence-filled dinner, I finally broke. Emily, I said, my voice trembling, do you even want this anymore? Do you even want me? She stared at me across the table, her fork frozen in midair. I don't know, she whispered. My stomach dropped. You don't know? Her eyes filled with tears. I want to. God, I want to. But every time I get close to happiness, something inside me panics. Like I don't deserve it. Like it'll all get ripped away, so I should rip it away first. I reached across the table, grabbing her hand. You deserve happiness. You deserve love. You deserve me. Her tears spilled over. She squeezed my hand, then pulled away. I'm scared, she said again, and I had no answer for fear. September crept in, the month we'd first met a year ago. The city was golden again, the trees turning shades of fire. Everywhere I looked, I saw the ghost of that first night, The cafe window, the fire escape where she cried, the sidewalk where I first kissed her. But instead of warmth, the memories felt like reminders of everything slipping through my fingers. One Saturday, we drove out to the lake. She insisted we needed one more adventure. We sat on the rocks, waves crashing against the shore, the wind tangling her hair. She looked at me with those dark, restless eyes, and for a second, I thought maybe this was her way of trying. "Do you ever think about how different life would be if we'd never met?" she asked suddenly. The question cut me. "Why would you ask that?" "Because maybe you'd be happier." I shook my head violently. "No. Don't you get it? Meeting you is the best thing that's ever happened to me." She smiled faintly, but it was a sad smile. "You're too good for me, Danny. Stop saying that. It's true." Her words hung between us, heavier than the waves. We drove back in silence. 2 weeks later, everything shattered. It was a Tuesday. I left work early, hoping to surprise her with dinner, just like I'd tried months ago. I picked up groceries, humming to myself, trying to believe we still had a chance. When I reached her building, I knew something was wrong. The door was unlocked again. Inside, the apartment was dark, quiet. Too quiet. "Emily?" I called. And no answer. I set the bags down, my heart hammering. I moved through the living room, the kitchen, the bathroom, empty. Finally, I pushed open the bedroom door, and that's where I found her. She was lying on the bed. At first, I thought she was asleep. The way her hair fanned across the pillow, the way her arms rested at her sides. But something in the room felt wrong. The air was too still. "Emily?" My voice cracked. I stepped closer. That's when I saw the empty pill bottle on the nightstand. The glass of water half drunk. Her chest rising too shallow, too slow. "Jesus, Emily!" I dropped to my knees beside her, shaking her shoulders. "Wake up! Please wake up!" Her eyelids fluttered, just barely. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. My hands fumbled for my phone, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. I shouted at the dispatcher, words spilling out too fast. "Pills, not breathing right. Please hurry, please, God." I stayed with her, clutching her hand, whispering every promise I could think of. "It's okay. You're going to be okay. I've got you. Stay with me. Please, Em, stay with me." The sirens came. Red and blue lights painted the street outside. Paramedics rushed in, voices urgent, hands moving fast. They pulled me back as they worked, their bodies forming a wall around her. I stood there, useless, my whole body shaking. When they carried her out on the stretcher, her face pale, an oxygen mask pressed to her lips, I followed like a shadow. The hospital was a blur of cold corridors and antiseptic air. I sat in the waiting room, my hands raw from clenching them together, my mind replaying the scene over and over. A doctor finally came out, his expression unreadable. "She's stable for now," he said. "We managed to get to her in time. But," he hesitated, "she needs more than physical care. This wasn't an accident." I nodded, tears burning my eyes. I wanted to tell him I knew, that I'd always known the storm inside her was bigger than me. They let me sit with her once she was awake. She looked so small in the hospital bed, wires snaking from her arms, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow. When she saw me, she broke down. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want you to see me like this." I took her hand, kissing her knuckles. "I don't care how I see you. I just need you here." Her tears soaked the sheets. "I don't know how to stay." The weeks after the hospital were fragile. Emily moved back to her mother's house for a while, her mother keeping a close eye on her. I visited every day I could, bringing flowers, books, anything to make her smile. Sometimes she laughed again. Sometimes we sat in silence. Sometimes she stared at the floor, her hands twisting in her lap, and I felt like she was already halfway gone. I told myself love would be enough. That if I held on tighter, she'd find her way back. But part of me knew I was only buying time. October came again. 1 year since we'd met. The trees turned red and gold, just like before, the air crisp. The city alive with autumn. We met at the cafe where it had all started. She wore the same oversized sweater, her hair tucked behind her ear. For a moment, it almost felt like nothing had changed. We talked for hours, like we used to. About books, about music, about everything and nothing. She smiled more that night than she had in months. When the cafe closed, we walked outside, the chill biting at our cheeks. She slipped her hand into mine, her fingers cold. "Danny," she said softly, "thank you for loving me." The way she said it, like a goodbye disguised as gratitude, made my stomach knot. "Don't thank me," I whispered. "Just stay." She kissed me then, slow and lingering, her lips tasting of coffee and salt. And in my chest, something told me the kiss wasn't a promise. It was a farewell. 2 weeks later, she was gone. This time, there was no second chance. No ambulance. No miracle. Her mother called me, voice breaking, words fractured through sobs. I dropped the phone, the world collapsing in on itself. I don't remember much of that day. Just the sound of my own breathing, sharp and ragged, and the image of her smile burning behind my eyes. The girl who had taught me how to love had also taught me how fragile it all was. The funeral was small. A gray day, leaves falling like ash around the cemetery. I stood by her casket, numb, my hands buried in my pockets because I didn't know what else to do. People spoke about her light, her talent, her laughter. I wanted to scream about her storms, her shadows, her fragility, because those were her too. And I loved all of it. When it was over, when everyone left, I stayed. I stood there until the sun went down, the wind sharp against my face, whispering the only words I had left. "I'm still yours, Em. Always." And that's the thing about love. It doesn't always save you. It doesn't always win. Sometimes, it just leaves you with memories sharp enough to cut. And sometimes, when the autumn leaves fall, they take everything with them.